and that the board has in place policies and procedures to deal with any conflicts that might arise. So we do hold them highly accountable for the performance of that school. We, over the course of a charter term, will meet with the board multiple times to review performance of the school and ask them questions. If they had a year when they really did not perform well, what did you do? What steps did you take? When did you take those steps? How did you know? What do you have in place as a system to know how well your school is doing? And if you're partnered with an organization, whether it's a for-profit or not-for-profit, how do you hold that organization accountable for what they have contracted with the school to do? Generally speaking.
Right, and Sherry, maybe you could talk a little bit as a charter school leader. What's your interaction with your board? What role do they play, briefly in sort of the day-to-day operations of the school or the overall operations? And also maybe in your opinion, what makes a strong board? Just answer those first two parts. We'll ask the third part later.
The board of directors at a charter school, I can speak for our charter school, is very similar. They play a very similar role as do traditional public schools. They're not elected and oftentimes self-perpetuating, but they have the same responsibilities as a traditional public school board does. They hire and fire the principal and or superintendent. They set policies, and they have fiscal oversight. And those are really their three main objectives for serving as board members. They do not have responsibility and should not have responsibility for day-to-day operations of the school. They can make suggestions, they can make recommendations to the superintendent, to administration, but then it's the responsibility for administration to investigate and decide whether or not that's in the best interest of the school. I think boards oftentimes in charter schools and maybe traditional public schools get in trouble when they start to want to assume the day-to-day operations and really get immersed in the details of running a school when in fact that's not their responsibility. It's much more of an oversight role and policy setting board. I think a couple things about a charter school board that I appreciate are the fact that we don't have elections, so therefore there aren't some of the election issues that arise in Kansas City, our school district. The board is elected by sub-district, which has been very problematic for the school district, because if you're not elected at large, you should have, but sometimes you don't have the entire district as your point of focus. You have your sub-district, and you're trying to meet the needs of the constituents in that sub-district, which might be very different from sub-district to sub-district. So a charter school board doesn't have those kinds of issues. Basically, the board meets monthly, just like a traditional public school board does. We had our board meeting last night. We have the same kind of agenda. We're required to follow the Sunshine Law, just like a traditional public school does. It very much functions and should function in the same way that a traditional public school, an effective traditional public school board functions.
And you talked about the boards being responsible for the fiscal oversight, and Doug, I think I'm going to direct this question to you. We've talked about non-renewal at the Charter Schools Institute of New York. There are good reasons why charters should be closed, which is poor academic performance. That needs to go away. People don't want to go. Well, it shouldn't be there. That's not typically, at least in our experience here, why they have shut down. It's typically been financial problems, I think. Could you talk a little bit about how to avoid that? First of all, what do charter schools need to do to avoid that kind of financial catastrophe? And then also some of the things that maybe we're going to do going forward that help prevent that at the authorizer level.
Sure. There are two pieces I think that are very important in order to make sure that a board is governing properly and really understands their role. One is board training. Very often these boards are